throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howe. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howe looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt intercepts it. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26, heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys. As always, coming to you live after a Tar Heel victory on the basketball court as the Tar Heels take down the California Golden Bears 79-53. So congratulations to the basketball program. But we're here to talk a little bit of football tonight because before the game started, just shortly before the game started, there was a huge transfer portal entry for Carolina. So we'll tell you about that. We'll tell you about the transfer receiver that Carolina is going to host as well, what that could potentially mean for Carolina's wide receiving core as they continue to look for a veteran there. And then also Carolina hosting a quarterback in the 2026 class. I'll tell you just a little bit about that before we get out of here on what will be a shorter edition of the podcast. But, this was a podcast that, I knew once I saw the news I was going to have to do. While I wanted to keep it short, and look, it's a basketball night, so I didn't know if Fitty was going to be up for it. That's his radio name. I don't know why I just called him that, but Josh, I didn't know if it would be one where, just, hey, you break it, talk about the news real quick, and then we'll talk about it the next time that we do a podcast episode. That was not the case. It was immediately met with, look, the starting quarterback of the team entered the transfer portal. We need to talk about that. And so that shows you how big of news this was, that Jacolby Criswell is back in the transfer portal after just one season back in Chapel Hill. So altogether, 4 years for him in Chapel Hill. But this year, clearly the most impactful for him from a Tar Heel standpoint. He got the chance to start in 10 games this year, played in 12 of the games for Carolina this year. So, just about as impactful as you could be for Carolina at the quarterback spot in a year where there was a whole lot of moving and shaking for the entirety of the season. He completed 58.1% of his passes for 2,459 yards and posted a 15-6 touchdown to interception ratio. Also ran for 103 yards and 3 touchdowns on 71 carries. So, first of all, when you see this news, what is the first thing that goes through your mind? Because honestly, I'm looking at some of the responses from Tar Heel fans, and you would have thought that this was one of the worst quarterbacks we've ever seen roll through Chapel Hill, with the amount of celebration that people are sending in the comments on the article, both on Twitter, on Facebook. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of shocked that that's really the response here.
Yeah, I think Not surprised with the way that the season ended for him individually. I thought middle of the year when this team had begun to find its stride, we were the ones that were saying, hey, he was playing good enough football for this team to win when they lost the 4 straight games they lost in the middle of the year. He wasn't the main culprit, even though he had turnovers in the games against James Madison. Yes, he was the quarterback of the team that blew a 20-0 lead at Duke, but it was really other issues with the team that was allowing Carolina to get beat. But we also acknowledge we live in a world where the quarterback gets all the praise for the wins, gets all the blames for the losses. But you look at the way the season ended for him, that Boston College game where he was just absolutely dreadful. Yes, the whole team was dreadful, but it really began and ended with him. And you look at how the NC State game was just up and down. This felt like this was always going to be the end result, it felt like. And it took a little bit of time to get there. I would have thought maybe he would have transferred out a little bit sooner. But if you're a Carolina fan bagging on him, I don't really know what's your end goal. I mean, the guy transferred back in and was told you're not going to be guaranteed a chance to start. He showed back up on campus as the third quarterback on the roster. We had enough problems at the quarterback spot with injuries and then just ineffectiveness to where we had no choice but to turn to him. And then in the midst of all the chaos, when your head coach quit on the team in the middle of the year, effectively, he still got this team in a position to go to a bowl game. And so, no, his numbers weren't sexy. He did not play to the level that we had seen the last 5 or 6 years at Chapel Hill with Sam Howell and Drake May. But if you're a Carolina fan that's being negative about Jacolby Criswell, you're just bagging on a kid for all the wrong reasons, because he was one of the few bright spots to watch this team at different points during the year.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly, that's how I felt too. It kind of shocked me that a lot of people were really feeling that way about him. I mean, this is not Nathan Elliott. And even Nathan Elliott, that's a guy that I thought was just dealt a really bad hand for a guy that was not supposed to ever have the role that he was dealt. I mean, dude, it's that he came back. As you said, there was zero expectation that he was going to be a guy that would eventually start for this team. And then not only is he the guy that ends up starting for this team is dead in the water in the middle of the season. They go into a bye week that they really needed. And it would have been real easy for a guy like him to just say, look, man, this just ain't working. That no matter what I do, I'm putting out great performances. It's not going to happen for me. I'm still going to be the starting quarterback of this team, but this is something that I just have to accept. He stepped his game up. He found a way to cut down on the turnovers and led Carolina to 3 straight wins to get them to a bowl game. And in a year like this, that's huge. That's what I think people have to realize. No, it was not where we thought that this team was going to be early, before the season started. But we also thought that, it was either going to be Max Johnson, a veteran, a guy who played in the SEC. We also thought that, Connor Harrell was going to be much better than he ended up showing us. And so for him to step up, to come into this situation and play as well as he did at times, to me, I just don't get how you have that negative of a mindset where you're basically celebrating the fact that he's gone. In terms of like the expectation that this was going to happen, I got to be honest, I'm a little shocked about this one. I really thought out of the 2 veteran guys, I thought he would be the one that would stick around. I thought Max Johnson would probably be the guy that would enter the transfer portal. Just because, I mean, for Max, you're at the point now. I mean, I think this is going to be year 6. It might be year 7 for him at the college level. I mean, the fact that he's even going to play is a miracle. And so I was expecting that maybe he ends up transferring, ends up going maybe a little bit closer to home. But he decides, look, man, I'm going to stick it out. I would not be shocked if he's a guy that's on the roster at the start of spring. I know there are people that are saying that they don't think he's going to be there. I think this move almost secures the fact that he's going to be a part of this roster this year. And for Jacolby, man, I don't know where he's going to end up going. I really hope that it's a spot where he can succeed. I don't know if it's going to be, hey, I'm going to try to go back to Arkansas. Wouldn't that be an amazing move if he ends up going back there to see if he can become the starter there? But, if he ends up going to, a group of 5, maybe he goes to Arkansas State, something like that. I would love for him to have success. He's a guy that I will be rooting for very hard, no matter where he goes. And I hope that a lot of Carolina fans will do the same thing. So, kind of mentioned it a little bit there. What do you think this means for the rest of this quarterback room? In particular, I'd say we start with Max Johnson, because I think not only is he going to be in this room to start the spring, I think he's going to be a guy that has a legitimate shot to be this team's starter when they take the field August 30th against TCU.
Yeah, I don't know how to feel about that, just considering what the way he looked on the road before he got injured against Minnesota, because that was as inadequate of quarterback play that we have seen probably, since Nathan Elliott. That's how bad it was. That may not be his fault. That may have been his fault of Chip Lindsey, or maybe just a guy that was just going through it on the road in a nationally televised game to open up the season, and maybe with being coached up by a guy like Bill Belichick and the offensive staff that he's still putting together would put him in a better position to succeed. So, I would not be against it because he has the experience. There was production at the SEC level, which is, of course, what Mac Brown was selling us on when they brought him in as a transfer just a year ago. I find it hard to believe that when the team takes the field, he'll be the starter. Maybe he'll be in the conversation. Maybe it's a quarterback battle in the spring going in to fall camp. But I'm not at a place right now where I think that Max Johnson will be leading this team out of the tunnel when they take the field against TCU for their first game under Bill Belichick.
Yeah, look, I think the thing that I'm looking at is he's a veteran. He's going to be the only one as of right now that's going to be on the roster. Maybe Carolina goes and adds another guy in the transfer portal. But here's the thing. If we're just looking at the guys that are in the transfer portal now, who is that quarterback that you're adding that is going to come in and immediately start as a veteran? I don't see that guy. I don't think that person exists. That guy, honestly, now for teams that, are maybe scrambling in the power conference, is Jacolby Criswell. And so unless there's another guy, and it's always possible, the thing that I know people are going to be asking, and I did not put this in the article and I probably should have, how can Jacolby Criswell enter the transfer portal when it's well past 5 days since the bowl game for Carolina? When you're a grad transfer, you can enter anytime you want. It doesn't matter. Anytime before the season, you can enter the transfer portal. And, as long as you enroll by the start of the fall semester, you can play on next year's, whichever team you end up landing with, you can play for them next year. And so I do think that there is a possibility that there are other names that end up entering the portal. But I think if Max Johnson's your one veteran, then I think that probably is the guy that you go with. If not, you're banking on going with either your second true freshman to ever start a season opener in Bryce Baker. Only other one to do it was Sam Howell. And look, that worked out pretty well. But is there a guarantee that Bryce Baker is Sam Howell? He's ready to come in and do that right away? No, because here's the thing about Bryce Baker. Love Bryce Baker. Watched him, a few times in high school. Did the same with Sam. The one thing with Sam that you have to remember is that when he was at Sun Valley, he started in his freshman year. Bryce Baker did not. because at East Forsyth, frankly, there's just too many good quarterbacks year after year that they weren't going to start him. So this would be a unique situation for him. Do I think it's possible that he can handle it? Oh, certainly. I think he's got the talent. But for Sam, that was a mindset that he already had gone through earlier in his career, being forced in as a freshman into a spot where, if I remember correctly, and this could be wrong, there might be someone that, lives in the local area that would correct me on this. I believe he was the first freshman quarterback to ever actually start a game for Sun Valley at the time. So this was completely unprecedented territory. He handled himself pretty well. And I think that really prepared him for what eventually happened at Carolina. So I don't know if the same thing can happen for Bryce Baker. And then the other option is to go with Ryan Brown, who, transfers in from Purdue. He started 2 games at Purdue, but I mean, look, one of them went great, one of them not so great. Now, the one that didn't go great was against Oregon. You can imagine a Purdue team that was arguably, and I think it's not even arguable at this point, the worst team in the Big Ten this past year. He just had no chance against Oregon. Looked great in the game against Illinois, who, by the way, was a ranked team at the time that they played them. So, I mean, look, maybe you trust one of those 2 guys, but I think, this staff in particular, and we'll see, Freddie Kitchens looks like he's going to be the offensive coordinator. He's clearly got a relationship with Max Johnson. You wonder if that's the guy that they end up rolling with. What do you think about the possibility of the other 2 guys in this room? And do you think that one of those 2 guys should be the one that ultimately starts the season opener?
Yeah, if I had to bet my money, I think Bryce Baker would be this team's starting quarterback when they take the field for the season opener. I know you're mentioning the lack of starting experience because he didn't start all 4 years in high school, and maybe there's something to be said about that. But at a program that he's coming from, even though he wasn't starting, was still getting coached up and is going to be, I think, is going to be ready for the moment. He just feels like a kid with the way that we know that he feels about North Carolina, the love he has, kind of like, with Sam, that the moment's not going to be too big for him, even with all of the hype and the hoopla that's going to be around him if he's a starter, being the first quarterback to start for Bill Belichick. So, and I talk about how this year, as much as anything, is a foundational year for this program in this new in their new setup. Well, Bryce Baker is your future. And so what better way to set the foundation than to let him just go ahead and start from day one and be the guy that could lead you to, a nice 8-4, maybe 9-3 type of season, get himself comfortable, get himself acclimated before the next year when the expectations are going to be really playoff, or not playoff or bust, but probably ACC title game or bust for Belichick and his staff. Could be proven wrong. It could be the transfer out of Purdue. And I would not be against that, because I think if that would be the case, he would have definitely had won the job over a veteran in Max Johnson or a guy that has the upside like Bryce Baker. But if I had to put any money on it down right now, I think when this team takes the field and we're in there in Kenan Stadium in late August, we'll see Bryce Baker taking the snaps out of the shotgun.
Yeah. Now, one other angle to this is, could there be a quarterback that is not in the portal just yet that Carolina could be interested in? The one that everybody is pointing to, and rightfully so, is a guy that just entered the NFL draft earlier today, and that would be Quinn Ewers, the now former starting quarterback of the Texas Longhorns. It's basically been stated as of today that no matter what, even if Quinn Ewers was to withdraw his name from the draft, that he would not have the option to go back to Texas. I think that's stupid. I really do. Look, man, I am a diehard Manning family guy. I am a New York Giants fan. I rooted for Eli his entire career. It is nothing personal against the kid. The thing that I don't understand is how you can guarantee me that Arch Manning is better than what we've seen from Quinn Ewers, a guy that's led that team to the playoff, or at least been part of leading that team to the playoff each of the last 2 years. And I mean, look, when you get to the semifinals each of the last 2 years, especially this year, it is a significant accomplishment. And so if he is a guy that ends up entering the transfer portal, there's an account that tweeted out earlier today, Scouted NFL. This is an account that follows the NFL draft and scouts rookies in the NFL. That I don't really know how much credence you can give to this. It's an account that has 18,000 followers, which is, pretty significant amount, but it certainly isn't, an inside source. But they said that Bill Belichick made a big offer to Quinn Ewers to come to UNC. If he enters the transfer portal, which I think there's a good chance he will withdraw his name from the draft because I don't really know how high his draft stock is. I think he believes, due to some of the things that I saw today where some draft boards have him as the third quarterback, that he could potentially be a first-round pick. If he's the third quarterback off the board, I guarantee you he will be picked in the second round or later. I think Jackson Dart is better than him. I think that's a guy that will probably go before him. And there are some other guys in this draft, even Jalen Milroe, a guy that I think a lot of people look at as a similar type of situation to Jalen Hurts when he was coming out in the draft. That could, force Quinn to the fifth, sixth quarterback off the board. And all of a sudden, we're talking about a guy that's being drafted in the mid rounds. If he gets that type of grade from some of the scouts in the NFL, I think there's a good chance he pulls out and will enter the transfer portal. If that happens, and he is a guy that is a graduate, so he can enter at any time. If that happens, should Carolina fans want Quinn Ewers to come to Chapel Hill for his final year?
Yes, the guy's 21-5 as a starter over the last 2 years. And no, he has led them to the playoff, and he's led them to 2 playoff victories, the semifinals, back-to-back year. Of course, last year was by default because by them making the playoff, it was only 4 teams. You're automatically into the semis. He led this team to a win at Michigan earlier this year. Now, granted, that's probably when Texas peaked, but how many teams go into the Big House and beat Michigan the way that Texas did? Mm-hmm. Not many. He was at the forefront of that. He led them in their first year in the SEC to the SEC title game. Took them and won at Texas A&M. And when that rivalry renewed itself for the first time in a decade, with the spot in the SEC title game on the line for the Aggies. So this guy has big game experience. He usually shows up. I think what happened this year was I think there just became a disconnect with him like Texas because of the way that the fan base begged and pleaded for Arch Manning to see more significant snaps. And when he got hurt was probably the worst thing that happened to him because they thought that maybe it was time to pass the torch. But if this guy enters in the portal, there's not any reason why Carolina should not go after him. And there's not a reason why if you're a Carolina fan, why you should not want to go after him. Is he as good as Sam Howell and as Drake May? I don't think so. But I know that guy has big game experience. And that guy, I think, with playing the quarterback at Texas, a year in the SEC, that guy will navigate the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, just all the extracurricular stuff that Carolina football is going to be exposed to this year with Bill Belichick being their head coach. So, and there's been a lot of smoke around this too. Mm-hmm. Of course, there was a little bit smoke too around maybe if Arch Manning into the portal, could he end up in Chapel Hill? But the stuff with Ewers to Carolina is legitimate. Whether what that account reported or not is accurate, we can't confirm or deny. But we follow enough people, we have enough connections to know that it was a thing with the whole Ewers to UNC. And so If he doesn't get the feedback that he's expecting to get out of the draft and he wants to stay in school, there's not a reason why Carolina should not exhaust trying to get his talents into their quarterback room in Chapel Hill.
And I mean, to be honest, they probably wouldn't have much of an issue doing that because I don't really know how many big schools would be in on him. This would make a lot more sense as to why Carolina has not gone after bigger guys in the portal, because they've been waiting for him to enter to give him the NIL money. Now, I saw, and I don't know how true this is. Remember, one of the other things that we saw when it came to him, there was a rumor that he was offered $6 million by one school. And many people believe that that was Carolina. If that's true, then yeah, that the majority of their NIL money is going towards him. That's why they are not paying other big name guys at these other positions. And to a certain extent, I kind of agree with it, because I think if you want to compete immediately, then going and getting Quinn Ewers makes a lot of sense. Yes, he was a guy that was inconsistent at Texas at certain times, especially in big games. But I mean, let's be honest. If you got to big games where you're playing against teams of that caliber, which, by the way, in the ACC is what? Clemson? Maybe SMU again next year? Miami, maybe? That's it. That's pretty much the only teams that you're going to have to face like that. All of the other teams that you would face are far easier than the teams that he faced this year in the SEC. And he didn't face the toughest schedule. But still, I think that he would allow you to have a pretty high floor for this upcoming season. And I think that's what you want. Yes, I love Bryce Baker. I think he has the potential to be a really, really good quarterback at this level. But the ideal thing for him would be to have him redshirt and take over the program next year. That would be the perfect situation, because guess what? Guess who was a redshirt freshman as well at one time in his career? Drake May, and that worked out pretty perfect. So I think that would be an ideal scenario for Carolina. Does it happen? We have to wait and see. If you're a Tar Heel fan that's hoping for that, you've got to hope that he gets some negative reviews from some of the scouts at the NFL level, which I think is certainly possible. So we'll monitor that. We'll see, is there any more buzz around that? If it's going to happen, I feel like it'll probably happen relatively quickly, but we'll see ultimately whether or not he actually enters the transfer portal. If he doesn't, I think you're looking at your threesome right there that Carolina has currently. I think those are the three guys that will be battling in the spring. And I would imagine it will probably extend into summer and eventually into fall, especially if Bryce Baker is the guy that looks like he's leading that group. They're not going to let a true freshman win the job that easily out of the gate, in his first year on campus. Now let's move to the transfer wide receiver that Carolina is going to be hosting really quickly. That would be Harrison Wallace III. He is a transfer from Penn State. Led the team in receiving amongst wide receivers. Tyler Warren, of course, their superstar tight end, led them in every receiving category. But he was the guy that led all receivers this year on this Penn State team. 46 catches, 720 yards, 4 touchdowns. This is the type of veteran receiver that Carolina is looking for. We know that they were primarily focused on trying to bring in guys in the slot. This is a guy that I think is going to play more on the outside. But I do think that Carolina, even though they value a guy like Chris Culliver, there's not enough production there just yet for you to really feel confident that he is a guy that you don't have to go out and potentially get someone else to at least, come in, start the year at the, out on the outside opposite of Kobe Paysor. And so I would love this move. Carolina's got, a group that they're going to be fighting. Louisville, Texas A&M somehow is in on him. I don't even know how that's possible, to be honest with you. They've added 4 guys in this class at wide receiver. How in the hell are they going to now try to go add another wide receiver? But hey, they've landed 4 of them already, so I wouldn't doubt it. And then you are going to have to fight off South Carolina as well, another team that I think is really, really hungry to add a player like him to that room. What do you make of the fact that Carolina is going out and trying to add a veteran receiver? Do you like the move, or do you think that they should trust some of the younger guys on this roster?
No, it definitely makes sense. And I know being the leading wide receiver in terms of production at Penn State does not mean everything, because that's a run-based offense that had a dynamic playmaker at tight end. But this is a guy that I think you could envision in an offense where the wide receiver is going to be more featured, could put up some pretty big numbers and help Carolina kind of, I guess, transition to different faces, having to step up into bigger roles and be counted on even more so than they were a year ago. And so, if he has the talent level to commit and play at a Penn State and then produce for a team that was very close to getting to a national championship game, then I think you got to be intrigued and interested and excited about potentially adding that type of talent to your roster. And whether is teaming up with a veteran quarterback or an inexperienced quarterback, could be a guy that could step right in and contribute in a major way. So credit to Belichick and the staff for getting involved in him. They're going to have their hands full, as you mentioned, with the likes of Louisville, A&M. South Carolina is going to be a sexy place to want to go play after the year they had last year, the emergence of Lenore Sellers at the quarterback position. But this should be one that I think it's if Carolina wants to go all out for and really put their money where their mouth is to try to land his services, I think I'd be okay with that, because I think it's easy to envision him having a major impact on the field next year for Carolina.
I mean, you look at his numbers this year, and 46 catches, 720 yards, pretty much the definition of a big play threat for that offense. It's not the most explosive offense in the country by any stretch, but he was the guy that when they needed to throw to a wide receiver, he always seemed to make plays. And the guy that I compare him with was a guy that transferred last year. People were like, look, he was good, but he wasn't great at Penn State, in Keandre Lambert-Smith. He ends up transferring to Auburn, and after a 2023 season where he had 53 catches, 673 yards, and 4 touchdowns, very similar numbers to what we saw from Wallace, he breaks out for 50 catches, 981 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And that is with some of the worst quarterback play that you are going to find in the country. So I think there's very similar potential for Wallace. And that's why I think Carolina's got to take a chance here, especially if you can get Quinn Ewers. If that is possible, this would be huge. But just having another veteran receiver for a Bryce Baker, for a Ryan Brown, even for Max Johnson, if he's the guy that starts the season as a veteran, to have other veterans in that room that you can trust, I think that's going to be huge for Carolina, because, right now you've got one guy that's produced, and that's Kobe Paysour, a guy who this year just did not look the same as he did before the 2 broken feet. And so I think you need somebody that is maybe on the upswing, has some potential, and that's exactly what Wallace is. I mean, the previous 2 seasons, guy that, was catching around, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, nothing overly impressive. And this year really breaks out. So I think this would be a perfect fit for Carolina at wide receiver, and hopefully they can at least get him on campus. That's the big starting point, is getting him to actually take his visit, and then we'll just see from there. Meanwhile, Carolina also getting ready to host 2026 4-star quarterback Derek Zammit. He is a guy that Carolina offered last week, and he will take a visit to UNC this weekend. Chad Simmons of On3 Sports, he spoke with him, and this was the quote from Zammit on Bill Belichick. He said, quote, "He's the greatest coach in the history of the NFL, and the fact that he sees something in me enough to offer me a scholarship means a lot." So Carolina already with a quarterback in that 2026 class in Zayd Lott, a guy that has some upside, but that doesn't mean they're not still looking around. We know that a lot of people are wanting them to push hard for Faison Brandon, the 5-star quarterback out of Grimsley High School. I would assume that the staff is certainly doing that, but he has said that he is staying firmly committed at this time to Tennessee. And so Carolina is not going to be afraid to take a look around. And Zamet is one of those guys as a high-end 4-star that Carolina certainly could bring in there and just add to that competition moving forward. This is what you should expect from Bill Belichick. And this is why all the people that are panicking and saying, oh, Carolina's not really landing guys on the 2025 recruiting trail. First of all, there aren't many guys left. And the guys that are left out there, they have established relationships with other coaches that have been lasting for years. The 2026 class, yeah, there's some guys that have established relationships with certain coaches, but the fact that Bill Belichick will now have a whole year to recruit those guys, I think it's going to have a pretty big impact, and that's why you should be encouraged. Well, we're going to have all the coverage that you need on the website, HeelToughBlog.com, an article that's going to go up right after I push end on this stream, will be the article about Harrison Wallace III. So make sure you check that out. And then, we'll have an article up tomorrow about Derek Zamet, as well as some other news that is rolling in for Carolina on the transfer portal front. So plenty of stuff to keep an eye out here as once again, the news cycle gets rolling. Today was a huge, huge day for the website once again with all the news that was rolling in because, not only did you have Jacolby Criswell entering the transfer portal, which you can go back and check that article out as well, but 2 more staff hires for Carolina. They go get Will Friend, the offensive line coach, a guy that's been all over in the SEC. So he's got plenty of experience. The success, not as great as you would probably want. So go read that article, see what I'm talking about. And then Carolina goes to the NFL ranks to find their special teams coordinator. That will be Mike Prefer, a guy that has been all over in the NFL and has coached some really, really good units on special teams. Hopefully he's a guy that can build off of the success that Larry Porter had the last couple of years. So go read that on the website as well. And keep an eye out for any other news that will be coming out. We suggest that you check the page every morning, afternoon, and evening. But also the best way to do it is to just go to the Heel Tough Blog page on Twitter, hit the follow button, and turn on the notifications so that anytime we post an article, it will be there for you. If you did that earlier this evening, you would have the recap from Carolina's game on the hardwood against Cal. Make sure you go back, check that out. And of course, Carolina will be getting ready for their matchup against Stanford. Josh will have you covered on that front as well on the website. So make sure you check it out. Podcast side of things, we'll be talking Stanford for you guys here in the next couple of days. So don't miss that. And of course, we're going to have the recap podcast where we will be breaking down this game against Cal. We will be recording that tomorrow morning. So make sure that you're checking that out as well. Tons of great stuff for you guys. And the best place to find all of it is on the Heel Tough Blog Facebook page or that Heel Tough Blog Twitter page. All in, all the content you want in one great spot. So make sure you check that out. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.